What's up everybody, this is the 2023 Honda Pilot Trailsport. So for the all-new generation of the Pilot here, it is really impressive looking. It's grown by a good bit. It looks a good bit bigger than the previous generation Pilot. Really a lot more trucky and muscular in my opinion. And so it's 3.4 inches longer on a 2.8 inch longer wheelbase. The track in the front and in the rear is a little over an inch wider, and it's even an inch taller. And then here for the Trailsport version, you also have a 1 inch lift. So this has 8.3 inches of ground clearance total, and so the Trailsport thing definitely amps it up a little bit more. It also gives you some skid plates and a few other touches around the vehicle here, but right up front there, it's really impressive how they really did a clean sheet design here, and I think this actually looks more like the second generation Pilot with the way they styled it up front here, which is a modern interpretation of that blocky squared off style. And so I just think it looks great up front there. Also here you have these 18-inch wheels that are on these all-terrain tires here on the Trailsport version, and look really good, and you also have bigger brakes hiding behind there as well. And then going down to the sides, I really like the side profile here. Again, just nice and squared off, just a really cool look. And then out back, I think it's really cool as well with those taillights that are kind of squared off and the bold Pilot badging there on the back, and also the fact that the rear hatch and all that is still a little bit rounded. It's not totally flat. So it gives it a little bit of interesting visual appeal there, a little different than some of the other boxy competitors. And I just think they really knocked it out of the park here with the new Pilot. I think it looks so good from every single angle, and is definitely, I think, more in line with what mid-sized SUV shoppers want these days. All right, so let's start up and go for a drive. The Pilot here has Honda's new key, and it's a nice small little key. It has all the buttons you need on it there. Just doesn't take up a ton of room in your pocket though, just nice and small. I love this key. I wish more companies would do a small key like this, but of course it is keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start. You just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. And if you're curious to hear about the interior in the 2023 Pilot, my wife and I just did a full in-depth interior review on this vehicle, so I'll link that video at the end of this one. You can go into all the details in that video as far as how the space is in this new Pilot, all the little touches as far as the interior and the way they changed everything. Overall, it's really nice in some ways. In other ways, it's lacking a little bit. So definitely check out that video for all the details. All right, so setting off here in the 2023 Pilot. So the first thing you notice about it, I think the first thing that I notice is the nice high seating position, which is, again, even more so here in the Trailsport with the extra ground clearance. But so, I mean, it means you have really good visibility. You have a great view forward. The only thing I will say is this A-pillar is kind of thick. As far as modern vehicles go, that is a little thicker than most in this segment, and you also even have the mirror still right at the A-pillar there. So a little bit of a chunky A-pillar might get in your way in some instances, but I haven't had any issues with it here with my week of driving the Pilot. And again, you sit up nice and high, so that kind of negates that a little bit. View out of the back is great in typical SUV fashion. Other things you notice here, so you have a more refined vehicle. It's on a brand new light truck platform, so that means you have more rigidity, and that means they're able to tune the ride to be softer but still have better handling, and it just feels a lot more solid being a larger vehicle as well. Brakes also feel nice and responsive, but one thing that is a little hit or miss is the throttle response. So this vehicle, this is something I've noticed. I think it's a 10-speed auto issue, because it's something that Acura also has with the MDX and the TLX, and I've noticed it in some of those as well, where every once in a while, I'd say it's fairly consistent, where you go to hit the gas from a stop and you have to wait a beat before it actually starts to go. And I'm not sure if it's the transmission figuring out if it wants to be in first or second to start off or what it is, but it just means that there's been a lot of times where I'm like waiting and I'm like, why is it not going? And then I push a little bit further, and then I get too much, and it's just this confused thing, and it throws me off, and I'm always like, it's a little bit of a jerky experience because you're not knowing exactly what to expect, and it prohibits you from being smooth with your driving of this a little bit. Minor nitpick, you can probably learn to live with it or get used to it, but here's one thing you don't have to deal with the others. All the other competitors are smooth from the get-go. There is no weirdness with those, and so just wish it didn't have that. But that's the only little thing I can complain about that you'll notice right off the bat. But I'm going to go ahead and put it up into the sport mode here, and that of course gives you some quicker throttle response and all that. But let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. And here we go. All right, so pretty responsive there. Wow, this motor's loud when it's full throttle. but man, it doesn't mess around. It really gets up and moves very, very nicely. So we have a brand new 3.5 liter naturally aspirated V6 engine here in the Pilot. Unlike some of the others that are downsizing, there's a brand new V6 here. So it replaces the old single overhead cam V6, and now this one has dual overhead cams. It's direct injected, and surprisingly, it does very similar power to the old one though. So it's only 5 more horsepower, 285 horsepower total now. Torque is the exact same as the old motor, which is interesting too. 262 pound-feet of torque. And so as far as 0 to 60s, it should translate to a sub 7 second time. You know, I think Motor Week tested a 6.8 second time out of this. So, you know, don't expect it to be really much faster than the old Pilot. And honestly, in some cases, it might be a little slower than the old Pilot just because you have a little bit more weight to haul around here, which I'll get into more in a minute. It's kind of interesting with the way these have gained weight. But other things though, so this road's definitely a little bit on the rougher side as far as generating some more road noise. And you hear some of that, but it's not too bad. I'd say it's, you know, not the quietest in its segment, especially these days now with the brand new Mazda CX-90, which is really impressive with its refinement. But it's pretty good, and you know, I think pretty par for the course with everything else out there these days. Sport mode still doesn't give me the immediacy I want out of that throttle response, though, again, from a stop. But other things here, so you do have paddle shifters, by the way, if you do want to play around with the transmission yourself. But this automatic, this 10-speed from Honda has always kind of had a mind of its own, where if you floor it, it just overrides your gear and then just goes immediately to a complete downshift. So it won't hold gears. It's kind of useless to have. I don't know why we even have paddle shifters, honestly, but I guess it's nice that they include them. And so one interesting thing, though, is the curb weights. So this one here, this is a Trailsport, and these weigh 4,685 pounds. And as we're going into a corner here, a nice tight corner, see how it handles here. Obviously, the Trailsport version is going to be probably the worst handler of the bunch with the extra ground clearance and the all-terrain tires. But, you know, this is almost 4,700 pounds. And when you look at a Trailsport of 2022, the previous generation, those were over 400 pounds lighter. And yes, the Trailsport now has more to it. So you have extra skid plates, you have unique suspension tuning, you have these more aggressive all-terrain tires compared to the previous generation, and, you know, a few other things. There's the Trail Watch camera and other things like that. It's a lot of extra weight, but the interesting thing is the base model, if you compare a base trim of the brand new 2023 version to the 2022 versions, it's almost an identical curb weight. So it's just whenever you add on the extra equipment where these get more heavy. But even like the Elite, which has a few extra features compared to the old Elites, but those are still also like 300 pounds heavier. So it's kind of interesting. And so I've noticed you do feel that extra weight. And again, the extra ground clearance is certainly hurting this one's handling. But to me, it just doesn't handle as well as the old Pilot. And I'd like to try out a non-Trailsport version to see more. But I mean, just it's bigger, it's heavier, and you know, you're taller up on the road and stuff. It's going to, I think, have worse handling than the old Pilot. And I really loved the handling in the last Pilot. It was so good. It was one of the sportiest ones in this segment, in my opinion, with the true torque vectoring all-wheel drive and all that. I still think that takes the cake as far as the best handling of the bunch. But whatever you're talking about, just in general, you know, this still has great handling. You know, you're still going to have the true torque vectoring all-wheel drive. It's the second generation of this all-wheel drive system. It now can send 70% of the torque to the rear, and then 100% of that torque to any individual rear wheel or any wheel that it wants to. And so it's going to give you better off-road capability, and that's kind of the takeaway. And I was really impressed with the first generation of this all-wheel drive system, because it actually, you know, overdrives that wheel, and that also helps with that handling. But it also really helps you off-road as well, and it really just was impressive. I know with the previous generation, I climbed a tall hill in Montana with the old one on all-season tires, and it was really impressive what that thing could even do. And now you have the better tires here, you have the extra ground clearance, and so Honda's really positioning this as even being a more sincere off-road version of a three-row crossover compared to a lot of the competitors that might give you some slightly more aggressive tires and not much else. This is a little more comprehensive with the lift and having, you know, more of a, you know, off-road tune to everything, and you know, the springs are unique in this version. You know, the damper tuning, all that kind of stuff has been changed as well, plus the skid plates. So it's a little more than a Telluride X Pro, for example, which I just had not too long ago, and you know, some of the others out there. But you know, it's still going to give you really good handling. They also did improve the steering, so it's quicker now. And I also got to say it's a little bit lighter. In sport mode here, it's a little heavier, but in the normal mode, it's really actually light steering. And I really appreciate that in a three-row crossover because you don't really need heavy steering in those. None of these things are particularly sporty, so I think it makes sense to just keep them, you know, nice and light and comfy. And I think this does a really good job with that. And also, speaking of comfort, the ride is also still really good here in the Trailsport version. You know, I think it might be a little bit, you know, more bumpy, I'm guessing, than a regular, you know, Pilot would be. But, you know, I still think it's a really nice, smooth ride. It's been a great thing to drive around the family in this week. No one's had any complaints, of course. It's still a really nice family hauler, even for the Trailsport version. And you also do have more sound deadening here for this generation, and there's active noise cancellation as well. So all that will help to make this a little quieter. And I still think it's a really nice and refined vehicle, you know, for this segment. And another thing to note too, as far as handling goes, is the brakes. So the brakes are over an inch larger for the front rotors than before, and so it's going to give you much better stopping ability than the previous generation, which you're going to want, especially considering the extra weight of this vehicle and it being larger and all that. But you know, it's good you do have some better brakes to back that up as well. And now out on the highway in the Pilot, it's really nice and quiet in here, and you know, for highway cruising, you know, 60 miles per hour here, it's really nice. You also do have adaptive cruise control as standard with lane keeping assist, and also on the higher trims you now get traffic jam assist as a new thing here in the Pilot. So that'll be able to do the inching up in traffic for you, you know, without you having to intervene. And so really nice that you have that now. And so as far as other things here while we're on the highway, we can talk about safety tech. So in addition to the adaptive cruise control, you know, you do have the lane keeping assist and the lane centering assist that it tries to do. And that's the one thing I did test out on some of our windier segments of highway here in southwestern Pennsylvania, and it did not hold the lane. I think I don't know how they did it, but they made this version of the Honda sensing tech worse than the previous generation. I don't know how, because I think it's got some improved cameras and all kinds of other stuff, but the way they changed the tuning for this, it's just not as good. And in the old Honda system, I never had to worry about it crossing lanes, and with this, it actually was crossing over the lanes, and so it completely failed in my book as far as being a lane centering or even a lane keep assist system. It did not assist in keeping the lane. It just went right over the lines. And it said that it was picking up the road lines and everything else, but this time here, even that was a mild corner, and it kind of got close to the lane there. Like this time it didn't go over, thankfully, but it on multiple occasions went over the lines to the point that I was like, okay, I'm not using the lane keep assist anymore because it just was not reliable. I don't know why, but that's my impressions. That's my takeaway here, unfortunately. I used to love the Honda sensing system, but after this week in the Pilot, it really let me down. And so I'm hoping for a new generation that gets back to what the first generation was as far as, you know, doing really good lane keep assist. So that's my one gripe here with this. Now, thankfully, it's standard, so you don't have to pay extra for it or anything. It just comes with it. But, you know, it's just one thing I wouldn't count on. But otherwise, though, you do have most of the good safety tech as standard. You know, you have automatic emergency braking. Blind spot monitoring is standard on everything except the base trim. When you get up to a sport or higher, you will get the blind spot monitoring as well as standard. All the other safety tech's really good. And the one thing I do have to really commend Honda for is their focus on crash safety as well. A lot of others like to talk about all the technology and don't really talk about the structure or anything like that, but Honda's been making a lot of great improvements with crash safety, where this Pilot's been reinforced. They said so now it's much better with side impacts compared to the previous generation. Of course, it's, you know, top marks across the board as far as all the other safety tests, and they even have new airbag technology here in all these new Hondas, and so it really just allows the head to have better control during crashes, so you have, you know, less severe injuries or less injuries at all. And so just really great that they, you know, focusing on that stuff as well, because again, it's just something a lot of other companies, I've seen so many presentations and, you know, sat through so many of these presentations from various car companies about their new vehicles, and very few of them actually talk about crash safety like Honda does. So, you know, I think from a safety standpoint, I really love the Pilot for that especially. And I mean, most people like myself, I like driving, I like steering myself, so not having great lane keep assist isn't the end of the world to me. And so, you know, I think just the extra safety you have here in this is going to put it over if you do like safety, even though the tech isn't the best in my opinion. But really a great highway cruiser, nice, safe, and obviously being larger and heavier, that also makes it safer as well. And so it just feels really good to have that, you know, extra peace of mind here behind the wheel. But the last two things I mentioned here are the fuel economy and the pricing and how it compares to its competition. So first off, fuel economy. So these vehicles are rated at 18 mpg in the city, 23 on the highway, and 20 combined. It's a little bit of a disappointment with this new engine that's not any more efficient. You actually lose 1 mpg in the city and 2 mpg on the highway. That is also partially thanks to the blockier styling. That's the price you pay for, you know, things that are shaped like squares. You just don't have good aerodynamics, and so as a result you're going to get worse fuel economy. But honestly, the fact that it's only 1 to 2 mpg worse, I guess, is commendable. So just the wrong direction to be heading in these days to have worse fuel economy than the old one, I think. But in my driving here, I've been driving 105 miles, and it was a good mix of city and highway. I'd say it's close to 50-50 split. I've been averaging 18.5 mpg. So, you know, I'm doing a little bit better than that city rating, but I was hoping to get closer to that combined 20, but I'm not far off. And so, you know, pretty much par for the course. I get like 18 mpg in basically all these mid-size three-row crossovers. And so if you are worried about fuel economy, I would just say that, you know, your other options are like a Mazda CX-90 plug-in hybrid that, you know, gives you some electric range and a hybrid, you know, function there. And also you have the Toyota Highlander hybrid that will also give you some better fuel economy if you are actually interested in that. But the last thing to mention here is the pricing and how it compares to its competitors. So the Trailsport version here is one of the more mid-range kind of trims, and you have the Touring and Elite above it. And so this one, as tested, is just over $50,000, like $50,135. And so at that price point, I will say this is very competitive. I think the way the Trailsport version is packaged, it is very competitive with its pricing, because you're basically about $1,500 cheaper than like the Telluride X Pro, which has, you know, their slight lift and the knobby tires on that and all that. And this has more capability than that does. The skid plates are more than you would get on a Telluride and all that. So I'd say this is probably going to be better off-road than the Telluride X Pro, and yet it's $1,500 cheaper. So in that case, it's a win. You also have like the Ford Explorer Timberline, which also does a similar type of thing to this. Those are $53,000 comparably equipped. So, you know, I think they really have a good value here because it's better than most of those as far as the off-road capability for those who actually do plan to use that. Now, the thing that you compromise on compared to those is the technology. And there's some key missing features here in this, especially compared to the Telluride and the Hyundai Palisade, that whenever you're talking about like an elite trim of these, the top Pilot, those are over $53,000. And that is a tougher pill to swallow, because you look at some of the other competitors, the best competitors in my opinion, like the Palisade Calligraphy. I had one of those last fall. Those max out at like $51,500, and those just give you things you simply don't get in even the Elite version of the Pilot. Like, this doesn't even have cooled seats. The Elite version at least has cooled seats, but in the Palisade you get cooled second row seats and you get heated third row seats. Now, those might be over the top things that you might not find any value in, but it just means that from a feature standpoint, like, this has heated second row seats, at least in that Elite, but that's as nice as it gets for that second row. And the Palisade just has more stuff. They also have much bigger screens. You have a 9-inch touchscreen, which in modern times, especially in this segment, is, you know, pretty small. The Telluride and the Palisade have double 12-inch screens for the gauges and for the touchscreen infotainment system. You know, and all the others, like the Explorer, has that huge vertical screen in those. And, you know, most of the other competitors too have larger screens than this for the most part. You know, so it's, you know, you're just missing out on some of that stuff. And so even like, you know, 50 grand for this Trailsport, yes, you have that off-road capability, but you still have only partially digital gauges. You only have heated seats. You do have a heated steering wheel, thankfully, but, you know, no cooled seats here in this. You know, there's just some stuff that I wish it had, and I think, you know, especially for the Elite trim, if they wanted to make it the best in its segment, you got to have cooled second row seats, and it wouldn't have hurt to have the third row heated like you get in the Palisade to really give you that top-notch, you know, competition. And I mean, even the Palisade offers like a massage function for its seat. Just a lot more stuff to really sell you on the luxury component of those, you know, versus this. It's nice and it's good, and if, again, you don't care about that extra stuff, I'd say the Pilot's one of the best picks in its segment. But it just, you know, for the same or less money, you get more stuff with the competition. So that's the only downfall here of the Pilot. Now, you know, you have the extra space here in the Pilot, and you do have some other things that put it over. So it's really going to come down to exactly what you are looking for, what is important to you and what isn't important to you, what you can live without, and it'll just come down to that as far as whether the Pilot fits exactly, you know, what you need and what you want, or if some of the others might be better. But just from a stuff you get for X amount of dollars, the Palisade, the Telluride, and many of the others do give you more as far as that goes. So that's the only thing I want to say about those. Overall, I still really like the Pilot. It's still one of my favorites in this segment, and even though there's that slightly annoying thing there with the throttle delay, it's still one of the top picks in my mind. I like that you still have, a normal automatic transmission. I like that, you have, still really good tech, even though it's not the biggest screens and the most wow factor. It still is really solid. Everything works really well in here. I like the setup. I like all the space. I like the way it drives. I think there's a lot to like here about the Pilot, and so, again, even though it doesn't have everything the competition does, it still is definitely one of my favorites for now. We will see, though. We have Toyota coming out with the Grand Highlander here this summer, and that's another one that could give this a run for its money, depending on how that plays out. We don't know all the details on that as of the time we'll be filming this here, but for the time being, I'd say this is certainly one of my favorites in the segment still, and I think they did a really good job here on the new Pilots. But anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the Pilot. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thanks to Honda for providing me here with the Pilot to review for you guys today. Please also leave a like, comment, and subscribe to keep these videos coming, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.